Jingliu, my queen, you are finally here. I will offer to you 10 servants to do your bidding, and of these 10, you can have 3. Hi. For our queen Jingliu, I tried 10 different supports, and so today I wanted to talk about how each of them performed and how it all felt. But before we get there, I am going to cover a few early observations. You're welcome to skip this section, but I think it provides pretty important context as to how she performs with other characters. Alright, point number 1, and it's that she's not as skill point efficient as I thought. She almost kind of feels like Zila. And this is because she actually requires 2 SP to get into her form, and every time this happens, she gets the action advanced. And so if I was to compare her skill point usage to Blade, she's like skill point, goes into transmigration, and then no skill point, and potentially one more no skill point if she uses her ult. Blade, on the other hand, is more like skill point, no skill point, no skill point, no skill point, and then skill point again. And so it's the fact that she gets the turn advanced that it makes it feels like she sucks up SP like a black hole. Now, this isn't actually a bad thing because even though she is a little more hungry than I thought, she is doing big damage and doing it earlier than other characters. I would probably describe it as front loading the damage. And so I would say that it's completely fine as long as you plan out your rotations. She still is kind of SP efficient, just a little bit less than I thought, because those action advances that she gets as opposed to extra turns means she needs to be buffed a lot more often. So I'm talking the Tingyun. And your Foxian girl is going to be buffing and burning a lot more SP than, for example, your Pela and your Silver Wolf. The next thing I want to talk about is the attack rope versus the ERR rope, energy regeneration rate. And so I've play tested the combination of these two a lot with the Tingyun, without Tingyun, with Bronya, etc. And the conclusion I've come to is that both of them are fantastic and a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, between the two, I would just prioritize the one that has better substats. When I was running the attack rope, I was hitting 200k, 220k, the kind of damage that you would see with like Imbibitor Lunae. But on the other hand, the ERR rope had me ulting a lot more, and so it felt like I was just getting so many more actions. Personally, I thought the ERR rope combined with Tingyun was so much fun, but it's statistically way less likely that you're gonna get a good ERR rope with like these kinds of substats, right? And so in general, for most people, I would probably just recommend going for the attack rope and getting some good substats. The next thing is that the HP requirements for her attack buff are actually way easier to hit than I thought. And the fact that there is a cap at 180% of her base attack means that Jingliu's teammates only need in total 6,600 HP to max this guy out every single time. And in endgame, most of your characters are going to be like 3k each. That's going to give you 9k already. I would say that this is something that you just straight up do not worry about at all. On top of that, the HP drain at 4%, it really isn't too noticeable until you start combining it with like the blade as well as a non-healing sustain like your Xuan. And the last thing is that I am running the quantum set. Honestly, it is freaking great and gets even better if you implant quantum with Silver Wolf because you can trigger the 4-piece effect. The ignore defense is just so freaking big, and I would say that it is definitely as competitive, if not more competitive, than the ice set. To be honest, I would almost always just prefer running this quantum set because you can use this on literally any carry. Alright, with all of that said and done, let's talk about the different supports, starting with Pela. So the main reason that we would bring Pela is because of two things. First of all, her AoE defense down, and I gotta say, this feels absolutely fantastic to use. Especially because it just helps Jingliu just really clear out all of those side mobs and do big damage to the big mob. But the other reason would be her E4, which gives ice defense down. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to use this one, but as you can imagine, it pretty much just means bigger numbers. But what I would say is the best thing about Pela in comparison to the other supports is how SP efficient she is, because it's very unlikely that you're actually going to be using this skill, and combining that with the extra energy regen from this one as well as the Eilons, she is getting her defense down a crap ton. But on top of that, because the defense down duration is on the enemy and not on Jingliu, it's way more comfortable because your Jingliu is going so fast, but it doesn't matter. The last awesome thing about Pela is that she is also ice, which means that if I run her with Silver Wolf, there is a way higher chance of getting the implant that the Jingliu herself needs. And speaking of Silver Wolf, very similar thoughts to Pela, and to be honest, running Silver Wolf as well as Pela in the same team is a lot of fun. Because what's great about this combo is that it really elevates Jingliu's single target damage. Giga defense down, on the boss and AoE defense down on everything else. Everything actually utterly evaporates. However, there is a little bit of a downside, and it's that we can't have Jingliu going fast. Just keep that in mind because the playstyle is completely different to as if you're running Tingyun and Bronya. Alright, so next I want to talk about Blade because it is actually a really interesting team. And the reason it's interesting is because you kind of have two options for DPS. You could run like the Jingliu, Blade, Bronya, and then finally a healer like a Lynx or a Luocha or a Xuan. And so no matter who you buff, whether it's Jingliu or Blade, the other one is still going to have a lot of value in sub damage, sub DPS, as well as breaking. However, what I will say is that running Jingliu with Blade is a little bit scary, especially if you're running Xuan. If this is kind of the configuration that you're looking at, I would probably go for something like Luocha or the Lynx, simply because it just makes it a little bit more comfortable. Now my guys, don't get me wrong, the Xuan is definitely going to work, but you just need to be a little bit faster about it. And in terms of the performance of the team itself, it's actually really fun, does really solid damage, a lot better than I thought. But if I had to choose between running this or running Hyper Carry, I would probably run Hyper Carry. I do think that the Hyper Carry variants are going to do more damage, but the breaking of this is actually pretty insane, especially if they have both ice and wind weakness. Alright, so we've talked a lot about Bronya already. Let's talk about her more formally. She is an absolutely fantastic support for Jingliu. She really makes the Jingliu shine, I think, because of the massive amount of turns she gets. I'd probably even go as far as to say that playing Bronya with Jingliu kind of feels like playing Bronya with Zila. However, again, the one thing that you do need to keep in mind is that she is going to make your Jingliu burn SP like crazy. So you just need to be prepared for that, whether it's like using your Bronya to auto attack to SP generate, or maybe running a more SP efficient support on the second slot like your Pela. Alright, and so next I want to talk about Tingyun, and all I can say is that she really does make Jingliu super fun. And when you combine your Tingyun with your Bronya, your Jingliu is pretty much literally flying and flooded with turns. However, because the Jingliu is actually getting a crap ton of turns, it means that your Tingyun actually has to use your Benediction, her E skill, more often. And so to be honest, this team that you see over here, Bronya, Jingliu, Tingyun, and Xuan, with the ERR Rope on Jingliu, this was incredibly fun. But I would also say that this is probably the most skill point heavy team that you can configure for your Jingliu. Alright, next we've got Asta, and Asta was okay. I think the best thing about Asta was her speed buff, and it definitely, again, gave my Jingliu a crap ton of turns. However, I gotta say, the attack buffs that we do get from Asta, they did feel a lot less impactful than like the damage buffs or like the crit rate damage buffs. And you could certainly see that in the numbers that Jingliu was doing. And in a similar vein, Yukong, she also didn't feel too impactful. The crit damage was great, but the extra crit rate and the extra attack just didn't resonate as well as, for example, Bronya's straight up 60% damage buff. I would probably take that every time over Yukong's buff, especially for Jingliu. If I had taken the time to maybe speed tune her a little bit better, or maybe even get her E6, she probably would have been a lot more performant. And so at this moment, I would probably just chalk it up to a skill issue. Alright, and so that's all of the offensive supports out of the way. Let's talk about the defensive ones, starting with Lynx and Luocha, because I think both of them can kind of be covered with the same points. What I will say is that they are both extremely comfortable. And because our Jingliu is constantly draining down the HP, I would say that I would way prefer a healer, AoE healer, over Xuan. I think I've already mentioned this, but Xuan, sometimes I did feel a little bit unsafe. But if you do have her signature light cone, or if you have another source of healing, completely fine. On top of that, Xuan also needs a little bit of SP to work to maintain that immortality. So what I'm saying is that Xuan will definitely work. You just need to plan out the SP a little bit. In practice, Jingliu actually just did so much damage, especially with the Xuan, that as an endgame player, you're probably never going to be getting to those points of HP that will make you worry. And so to kind of summarize all of this, I would say that this is my favorite team configuration in terms of fun, but in terms of like comfy performance, I've got to say I preferred this one a little bit more. It was just a lot more brain dead with like the defense downs all on their side, and we just fling our Jingliu at them. For the sustain, I would probably pick Luocha or Lynx every single time. However, that is only at E0 and it's a personal preference. Because I definitely did have a chance to test the Xuan with the light cone, 100% fine, completely fine. But if you have the E1 Xuan, I think that I would take an E1 Xuan over Lynx over Luocha every single time. Her offensive buffs are just like, it's just way too much, man. At the end of the day, I would say that any of those combinations are completely fine. I probably just wouldn't take Asta and wouldn't take Yukong unless there was like a fire and imaginary weakness. Then I would take them. But otherwise, my guys, that is going to bring us to the end of this video. And so, my guys, let me know what team you landed on for your Jingliu. As with any other hyper carry team, I think she is going to work with any combination of those supports. Regardless, I appreciate you guys for watching. Thank you guys so much. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.